Hey, Rube, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. I figured out how to sneeze off mic. Big allergy day today. How's your allergies doing?
A little rough. I went this morning once it got to like 10 o'clock, 10:30. It was warm enough that the dew had kind of dried off. I went and mowed my parents' lawn. Uh, so I'm just out there mowing the lawn, sneezing the whole time.
Yeah,
I had
that's
enough.
kind of
My
day.
car was like covered in pollen, and I just took the hose and sprayed it off yesterday.
It's that time of year.
It is. It's a good time of year. Those the Eagle Eye podcast. We're presented by Nissan, Reuben Frank, and Dave Zangaro. How you feeling after the draft? We feeling relaxed, refreshed, ready to go?
Yeah, ready for the next one.
Are you?
I'm already working on my 2027 mock draft.
It is a long few days though, the draft. Even Howie, it was funny at the end of the draft, he was like, I have to like go home. I think he said pour himself a tequila and like just think about what happened because it happens so fast and then it's over and there's 10 new players and you don't even know what just happened.
Yeah, and it really kind of, you know, emphasizes how organized you have to be as a GM and a scouting staff because these picks are coming, one after another. I mean, eight picks on Saturday in what, like 4.5 hours or whatever it was, 5 hours. And you got it. That's why putting your board together is just the most important thing. Then you can just kind of take whoever's next because if you try to, well, they have 4 minutes for the last couple of rounds. You try to start figuring things out, then you're going to be in big trouble.
It is funny because they do so much work on all these players. After the draft, he's probably like almost forgetting which players they drafted because there's all these like, okay, if this guy's here, we're going to draft him, and then a team picks him, and then you got to go to Plan B. It's like, do you think? I'm sure he could name the players, but there's probably a moment where he's like, who do we even draft right now?
He was at that point when we talked to him late Saturday afternoon. I think he was just overwhelmed, and I mean, he put so much into it. So, I mean, it's the most pivotal time of the year. I mean, free agency is certainly not the stress and the immediacy of the draft. And you can work up to signing guys during free agency, but man, the draft, those 3 days, how he spends so much of his year preparing for those 3 days, it really is something. And then, if you're not ready, if you're not, I think, physically and mentally ready for what's going to happen from Thursday night to Saturday afternoon, you're in big trouble.
That's probably true. Yeah, it was a fun weekend though. Hope everyone enjoyed the daily pods during the draft. The next time we do daily pods, we'll be in training camp. That'll be a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, and we should have a schedule for that by early August, late July. We know they're doing one round of joint practices, right, with the Browns.
Just one practice.
Oh, it's just one practice.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. I wonder if there'll be a second session.
I think that's possible. I think Nick typically likes to do too. Last year they didn't because the Sao Paulo game kind of screwed up the timing and the schedule of everything.
I know some teams are reluctant to do joint practices after a Super Bowl because your season goes so late, um, and you just trying to, I guess, I don't know, make training camp like you just don't want to overdo it with guys, and those practices tend to be more physical than normal practices. But I don't think Nick's concerned with that. I think if he has the option, we don't know who they're playing in the preseason yet or where, but I would think if he has the option, he would do another set.
Yeah, I think so. Imagine telling Vic like, "Sorry, we went to the Super Bowl. We can't practice hard this summer."
He would walk out of the building.
Probably. Yeah, that'd be funny to watch though.
I think Vic's had a this is I know we're not scripted to talk about this, but I think Vic has really had an impact on Nick as far as just the way he looks at practice. I
I
think
think
that
that's true. I don't know if it's actually changed Nick's view as much as it's like Nick is willing to
right.
go along with what Vic wants a little bit, or there's like a compromise.
Well, if you go along with what Vic wants and then win a Super Bowl, it might change the way you look at it.
Possibly, but it might only be because that defensive coordinator knows what to do at the time.
Could be.
Yeah. All right. Well, we talked all through the draft that we weren't going to answer questions during those draft podcasts, so we'd get to them all the following week. And guess what? It's
It's
the
the following.
following week. And we have a bunch of questions that have piled up. We want to get to a lot of them. Eagle-eye at NBCUni.com is where you can send those emails. We got a lot of great questions. So I feel like this is just a good way to kind of reset after the draft a bunch of different questions about some of the players they picked and didn't pick and the process and all that stuff. So let's just get into it, huh?
Let's do it.
All right. So the first one here is from Eric. With what we now know about what happened last draft with the Eagles moving up to get Cooper DeJean, then seeing his impact throughout the year and ultimately the Super Bowl, do you feel that other GMs, when they see the call from Howie Roseman, will automatically think, I'm not doing a deal with this guy again, or at least be more hesitant to do a deal, considering how good the last deal did and the Eagles being defending champions?
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen because GMs all think they're not sitting there thinking Howie's smarter than me. They're thinking this time I'm going to get him. I just don't think if you're a general manager of an NFL team, you're looking at it that I don't know what's the word passively, like he's going to get me. You think that you have all the answers, and you think you're going to get Howie this time on this trade. And I mean, Howie's asked a version of that question on Saturday. He said, we're all trying to improve our teams. And if there's a GM out there that thinks a trade with the Eagles is going to improve his team, he's not going to avoid that trade just because Howie's on a roll.
Ultimately, I think you're right. Like, there are going to be trades, but it did feel like at times during this draft, he was getting boxed out a little bit. There were moments where, especially in the first round, where you're thinking, this is kind of where he likes to trade up. We hear the reports that he's trying to trade up and he can't get it done. I think that was probably more about the prices to move up at that point. Then we saw like what the Falcons had to give up to get to 26 to draft James Pierce. And it's like, okay, well, the Eagles aren't going to do that. But I don't know. I think it's like it probably gets overblown a little bit, but I think there's probably something to the idea that when a GM sees 215 flash up on his phone, there's probably like a moment where he goes, "Oh, what's he trying to do here?" You don't think so?
I'm not sure GMs look at it that way. I think every GM thinks they're smarter than every other GM. I don't think you can get to that position. Maybe there's a few, maybe new ones or,
Well, they shouldn't because they're not in a lot of cases.
I agree, but it's all how they feel about it. And I think you don't get to that position if you're not super confident about your process and your ability to make the best deals to help your team.
That's probably true, but there's also some bad GMs.
That's true. Yeah, there
They're
are.
just bad at
And
it.
maybe they're the ones that, but I'm guessing even the bad ones think, we've gotten bad breaks. We've had injuries. This guy, we didn't.
They're so bad they think they're good.
Yeah, which is true in every field.
Yeah, yeah. There's
Especially
something
ours. I'm not going to get into that. I'm not going to talk about our colleagues. But yeah, I do think that if Howie calls, like, how can we help our team? Maybe there's some instances of that, but I don't think it's a widespread thing.
Probably not. Who was it on the who called him a pain? Was it Adam Peters? It was like a draft day video where he calls me. He's a pain in the rear.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was.
I think he has that reputation because he's always trying to like maximize value. And
Yeah.
you and I were joking that trade up from 32 to 31, he ended up trading away pick 164 when he had 161, 164, 165, and 168. And there was probably some negotiating to get it to 164 and not 161.
Yeah, and that's his guy, Brett Veach, that he's dealing with. So I'm sure there was a lot of joviality involved in that. But Howie's made more trades than anybody since he became GM. So I mean, he made 5 this past weekend, or I think it was 5. So they weren't all huge, but he's able to get deals done.
Yeah, you're right. It certainly hasn't like limited the number. He's doing a lot of them.
Yeah.
Next one from John. Got a lighthearted question for the both of you. How does it feel hearing Jahad Campbell talk about Eagles players he grew up watching and mentions Vic, Sproles, Djax, Shady, and Macklin? It's crazy how we're starting to see this newer generation of Eagles fans become Eagles players.
Yeah. I mean, that's what you would expect from a guy his age. And he was pretty young when those guys were playing. It was Macklin's last year here was what, like 14 or 15? So yeah. I like it. I like the fact that these guys, are able to come up on demand on a Zoom call with media that they've never met to come up with their favorite Eagles from back in the day. I think it's pretty cool. And it was him who said he who said his dad was a Randall fan.
Yeah, way back in the day, he said.
Way back in the day. I don't remember that far back.
He said his grandfather, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was his grandfather. Yeah. I think it's neat. I think it's cool.
That one, when he said that, we were in the press conference, and I think I glanced over at you real quick.
Of course you did. I was trying to make a list of players the Eagles have drafted whose dad played in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, 3 the last 2 years. Jalen Reagor, his dad, Monte. Casey Matthews, dad, obviously, and grandfather. They drafted a guy named Hank Bulla, a linebacker in the 90s, whose dad actually played in the league and then was a coach for like 25 years with the Bills. I couldn't think of a whole lot more. Now, they had other guys whose dads played in the league but weren't drafted here. If anybody can think of any more, shoot those names over to me.
Okay. Yeah, I'll think about that too for you. You mentioned it, so it's just drafted, not played for.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, I'll think about that for you a little bit. It was funny, though, when he's mentioning those names. You know, the player that made me feel oldest, and I don't even know him, but Asante Samuel Jr., when I saw that name come through the draft cycle, that one was like, whoa, what's going on here? For me, at least.
Yeah, it's crazy. I remember, Flipper Anderson from Paulsboro, who's drafted by the Rams, had a nice career. I remember I covered him in high school when I was at the Gloucester County Times. And then, like, just a few years later, I was covering his daughter, who was a track star. And I was still a young guy. And I'm like, this is crazy, Yeah. I think I've covered 1 3-generation family as well. So it's crazy.
Who was that?
But it's fun. Sorry?
Who was that?
It was a Cinnaminson family. I think the Meekins.
Okay.
Just track stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nothing you want to talk about. Trust me.
Yeah, I will trust you on that. Let's go to the next one here from Michael. Dave and Rube, there seems a chance Jahad Campbell misses OTAs in some of training camp. Nakobe Dean may also not be ready to open the season. After the success of Avonte Maddox, Cooper DeJean change during the bye week, do you think Vic Fangio and Nick Sirianni are more comfortable if they need to open the season with Jeremiah Trotter Jr. next to Zach Bond, then adjust when health allows?
Yeah, I don't even want to speculate because we just don't know about his shoulder and when he'll be there. We don't know about Nakobe. We don't know about his knee and when he'll be able to practice. I would be excited to see Trot and what he can do if he's getting reps with the ones. He might get them anyway. Because by the start of camp, it's hard to believe they're going to be at full strength at that position. So, I'm excited about seeing Trot, and I know it's, the way the depth chart looks right now. He's not going to have a prominent role in defense, at least, but I want to see as much of him as I can. And then at some point, those other 2 guys will be back. I think Campbell will probably be back before Nakobe. I think, without really having any expert medical knowledge of either of their situations, I think Nakobe could go, 4 to 6 weeks into the season.
Yeah, he'd be a pup guy.
Yeah, maybe a pup guy. Whereas it seems like with Campbell that, I don't know, but it seems like he might be coming back during camp. But again, I'm just speculating.
Possible. Yeah, obviously some serious medical concerns there, or teams probably would have taken him a little higher. Yeah, I don't know. I think I would put I think I would put Jeremiah Trotter Jr. down as like a quote unquote loser from the draft, because I think Campbell, if he's healthy and Nakobe isn't, I think they would probably plug him into that spot next to Zach Bond, and that would potentially hurt Trotter. But I think they're relatively high on Trot. You think back to the last playoffs, they were planning on playing him and Oren Burks, and then Oren Burks just played really well, and Vic wisely decided not to play him. But they were fully prepared to play Trotter then. And then Burks gets a 1-year deal, right? 2-year deal, 1-year deal. It was a cheap deal with the Bengals.
Cheap 2-year deal, I believe.
Yeah.
with the Bengals.
Bengals, yeah. And I think by the virtue or the nature of that contract, it's like I don't think they could have paid that if they wanted to. And I think that shows some confidence in Trotter, especially because the situation with N'Kobe is so much up in the air.
2 years, $5 million. So
Yeah.
that was a surprising one. I thought he'd be back. I didn't see any reason he wouldn't, and I'm sure they would have certainly paid him that. I mean, that's for a guy with that experience, that's barely above minimum wage. So that was an odd one. Maybe he just felt like he'd have more an opportunity to be a starter for the whole year with the Bengals. He played great in the postseason. That was one of the bigger surprises to me, was just, because like during the season, like when he did get to play, like he would see some flash plays, but he was up and down. But in the postseason, I mean, he was lights out. He played
Yeah.
great.
But I took it as a vote of confidence that he's not here.
Yeah.
A vote of confidence in Trot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who, by the way, he might be a loser of the draft, but two of his teammates end up here. Drew Makuba and then Kyle McCord, who was teammates with him at St. Joe's Prep.
Yeah, that's true.
Next one from Ted. It seems to me that a player's measurables, while important, sometimes cloud the larger issue of how good a football player is. While requisite athletic ability is necessary, it is not sufficient. Sometimes the on-field product, not to mention other unquantifiable traits, are not given enough weight. For example, while Shamar Stewart is undoubtedly a fantastic athlete, his production in college was not terrific. Jahad Campbell's production, admittedly while playing at a different position, was fantastic. Some players, Cooper Jean, Jalen Hurts, etc., are just better than the sum of their parts. Do talent evaluators focus too much on the talent and not enough on the actual football player? Could this perspective partially explain Howie's superpower?
I don't totally understand the question.
I think it's basically measurables versus production.
Yeah, I mean, GMs are going to take everything into account. I mean, those are, if the production's there, but the traits aren't, then you look at, where did the production come from? Is it something he's not going to be able to duplicate in the NFL? In a lot of cases, that's the case. That's why you see so many guys who had big numbers, big sack numbers, late round picks. Eagles had one. It's because they don't have the traits that would carry over to the NFL. But then you see a guy who doesn't have the production, but he's got all the traits in the world. Then you're thinking, all right, we get him in here. He learns how to play. We coach him up. I think most GMs would rather have the guy with the traits and not the production than the production, but not the traits. Obviously, you're looking for guys with both, and those are your first round picks.
Yeah, the best, well, not always, but
not always.
Yeah, the best case scenario is you have a highly productive player, the athleticism matches the tape, like the timed athleticism, the testing matches the tape, and you go, okay, there aren't questions with this player. And it's a little rare for it to all just work out perfectly. And then, okay, with the production, okay, why is there a lack of production? Is it because they're not good enough? Or is it because, hey, maybe they're not asked to do this? Maybe they're not being coached properly. Maybe they're at a program like Georgia, like Nolan Smith was, where there's a lot of mouths to feed, and you might not be able to. There's like unrefined players too. It's also why age matters at times, right? Like, and we've talked about it with Ty Robinson being a 23-year-old defensive tackle. He kind of fit. Like, I think there's legitimate worry there, and he's a 4th-round pick, so it's not like they used. And I'm excited to see him play. I think it might be a really good pick, but you have an older defensive tackle who finally produces in his final year, 6-year senior. Okay, he's going up against kids or guys who haven't had that much experience and don't have grown man strength yet. So I think all of it kind of, it's what makes it such an imperfect science.
Yeah, and how is that specifically about guys like Shamar Stewart and guys who didn't have the production? Like, how do you evaluate them? And the first thing he mentioned was what you just said. What are they being asked to do? And a lot of coaches are just not going to ask a player to do what a scout might want to see them doing, or what he might translate into doing in the league. So, yeah, a lot goes into it. I mean, what did Nolan Smith have? Like 11 and a half sacks his whole career at Georgia, something like that, 13. he was playing 40% of the snaps, and they had so many pass rushers every year. They had like waves of guys, and you're not going to get 17 sacks, like you might at Boston College or somewhere. So, there's a lot to weigh, and it's why it's really hard to pick good players.
Yeah, I think back to COVID, and a lot of teams had to rely on the tape more than the testing, and it kind of created these incomplete profiles
Yeah.
of players. And like there was a point in my career covering the NFL where I thought, man, the tape should reign supreme. Like that should be number one. But you grow up a little bit and you realize, okay, well, like you're not drafting players for what they've done. You're drafting them for what they can do. And it's all projection. It makes it tough.
Yeah, and that's why stuff like the Senior Bowl is so important to see these guys go up against guys who are just as good, whose production was just as good as theirs in college, and especially guys who went to smaller schools. Probably get to see them against A-level competition. I think that's as big for Howie as the tape.
Yeah, yeah. Senior Bowl is a spot where it kind of levels the playing field a lot, and you get to see guys do different stuff.
Yeah,
Was a big part of the Quinion evaluation. He was always in off coverage, which is mostly what the Eagles are going to run anyway. But getting to see him impress a little bit at the Senior Bowl it helped complete the profile. All right, next one from Christopher. Hey guys, long time listener, second time writer.
Ooh.
Firstly, thanks for your hard work all year, but especially during this time of year where so much needs to be unpacked. I've heard so much great stuff about fourth round defensive tackle Ty Robinson. Seems like Howie might have gotten quite a steal here. Wondering why a player with so much going for him dropped to the fourth round. Not to be negative, just trying to get the whole picture. Also, Dave, would love to hear about any interesting wildlife encounters you've had in your travels. Let's talk about Ty Robinson first.
Well, did you ever run into Ty Robinson when you're out hiking?
That'd be scary. He's a big guy.
Any bear sightings?
Yes.
On the trail? All right, we'll get to that.
Mm-hmm.
I want to hear that. Yeah, I think age is part of it with him. I think that's one red flag.
The 1 year of like big time production.
1 year big time production.
Yeah, he had 7 sacks in 2024. He had 5 in his 5 previous seasons in college.
Yeah. So I think that's a good place for him. I think the fourth round's a good spot for him because I do think he has a chance to be a contributor, but the age and really it goes for anybody that having that 1 year. It really raises questions. Scouts want to see a pattern of success over a number of years, and he doesn't have that.
And the other thing I will say, and this is not a part of his profile, but it was a really good year for defensive tackles. So it's very possible in a different draft, he goes on day 2 and he's not there in the fourth round for the Eagles. So I think that's probably where they find some value in this draft. And there's always like different philosophies when there's one position that seems really deep in a draft. You can try to, get the best one early, or try to wait a little bit and pick a player who falls because of the talent in front of him at that position. I think that might be the case with Robinson.
He's also, I'm trying to remember, his arms are like 32, right?
Yeah, so it's weird. He has decently long arms, but or actually his he has weird metrics. Hold on, let me see. Because I remember looking into this when they drafted him. Yeah, so he has a decently long wingspan, but his arm length is super short. So his arms are 32.25 inches. His wingspan is over 81 inches. So his wingspan is in the 68th percentile. His arm length is in the 15th percentile. You know what that means? Broad shoulders. That's all that means. Yeah. But still, like if you're trying to run like a long arm move, it does hurt you a little bit, I guess.
Yeah, interesting disparity.
That's what it has to mean. It's just that he has broad shoulders and they take up a lot of the wingspan.
Yeah, so his arms start late.
Yeah. It's such a weird thing in the scouting community when you're like really judging players' bodies. And it's weirder for us to do it, but we have like, it's like I have no skin in the game, but we have to kind of do it. And there's always like sometimes it's like a weird thing in someone's body that you don't really know how it's going to play. Like Jalix Hunt, the first time we saw him at OTAs last spring, I remember I think I walked up to you and I was like, man, he's high waisted. Like kid's all legs, and I don't know what that means. It's kind of like a weird, different type of body type, and for him, it hasn't. It's been fine. He's been good. It's just sometimes things are a little different. And honestly, I think for him, like it's probably a different body type than some edge or tackles are used to dealing with.
It reached the point of absurdity with Kenny Pickett and his hands.
Sure.
I mean, like every question at the combine was about his hand size. He's like, I just throw the football. I've been fine up to this point.
Well, I mean, even this year, Will Campbell, right, with the short little arms, and he's like, yeah, I don't know, man. Like I've been a really good player my entire life.
I wonder how long my arms are.
I don't know. We should measure.
We should do the media combine.
God, what a hacky idea that's been done a million times, huh?
Yeah, that is pretty bad.
Yeah. Animal encounters. I kind of have one that's topical. Have you heard people arguing this 100 men versus one gorilla thing?
No, I haven't heard about that.
Okay, AJ Brown's been in on it. It's basically like, could 100 men take on one gorilla, one silverback? I don't know. I can tell you they're scary. I've been up close with one. They're enormous and they're terrifying. Yeah. Probably the closest I've ever been to like being scared near an animal.
Now, where was that?
That was in Uganda. Yeah, I was on a gorilla trek.
How far were you away from it?
10 to 15 feet.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. There was like a kind of like a little hill, and there was a trail going up the hill, but there was a trail on the top of the hill. So it was like it's a habituated group of gorillas, so they're relatively used to being around humans. But the full family kind of took the trail in front of me, so I'm watching the full trail, and he was the last one. He's watching them get through, and then he goes. And at the top of the hill, like 10, 15 feet from me, he stops and he stares down at me, and they tell you to like look down because you don't want to make eye contact. They might take that as a challenge or a threat. So I'm looking down, just like trying to take photos, like not looking at him. But I still remember I could smell like the musk when he walked by, and I was terrified.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I think the closest I ever came to like that kind of situation was when I was a kid. The neighbor's dog Max got loose and came into our yard.
Max was a big dog, though.
It was a poodle. Max was a poodle. I ran for my life.
He was fierce, though.
He was semi-fierce.
Okay. That was probably bears. Oh, yeah, a few bears here and there. I've only ever seen one grizzly, and I was in a car, which I was happy about.
Yeah.
They're scary.
They are. We should do an animal draft. All right.
From David. Hi, Dave and Rube. I'm from the Wedding, Wyomissing area. I went to Wilson High School. Now live in Nashville, Tennessee. Really appreciate y'all keeping us Eagles fans informed and entertained during the season and in the offseason. I'm interested in hearing your thoughts about the comparison of Jahad Campbell to Micah Parsons. Both are 6'3", 245, both big-time impact players off the edge in college. Did the Eagles just draft a Micah Parsons with a 31st pick? Thanks for everything and keep up the good work.
I mean, Micah Parsons is a once-in-a-lifetime player. There are similarities, I guess, but I would never until you see the product on the field, you would never make that comparison. It's not fair.
I was surprised to hear Howie kind of invoke Micah, though, in that
he did
intro presser. He talked about how Penn State has had some players like this. Like if you're talking about Penn State and their players who are kind of like off ball / edge, like you're talking about Micah Parsons and Abdul Carter.
Those are the two guys he was comparing them to.
Yeah.
Yes. Without mentioning
Maybe
them
some
by
Chop
name.
Robinson, but like, it's a high praise.
Yeah. I mean, I just don't think it's fair to even think that way, but he's certainly got a lot going for him as far as versatility and skill set. I can't wait to see him in camp. You know, he was first on my radar when Barrett did his breakdown, and I think I was co-hosting that day. So you're at the big board, like watching this guy, on this like 50-foot screen, just blowing up plays, and I was like, wow, this guy can do a little bit of everything. So I think he's got a chance to be a really good player. But look, Micah Parsons is a Hall of Famer, so not going to go there.
Let's not get there too quick.
He'll be a Hall of Famer.
Okay.
He's a two-time defensive MVP, isn't he? I think.
I don't think he is. Is he?
Maybe not.
He's a really good player, but I mean, he's and like I think he's a 2-time All-Pro so far.
2-time first-team All-Pro, 2-time.
He finished second in Defensive Player of the Year twice,
and third once.
Yeah,
okay.
He's really good. It's early in his career, but
52 sacks in 4 years. How many guys have done that first 4 years? 112 quarterback hits. Never had an interception.
But anyway, like I think the one thing that I understand the comparison is like when Micah came to the league, he was playing some off ball. Then they put him on the edge out of necessity, and then he's been great there. And it's like you have a versatile player. You just got to figure out where he can be the best player. But I think it's more than that because, let's be honest, you're more valuable if you're a really good edge rusher versus being a really good linebacker.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess it was really Parsons' first 2 years, he was more of a linebacker, or it was kind of 50-50, but he's an edge.
Yeah, now he is.
Yeah. So I'm curious to see how it goes with Campbell and just how much, whatever they decide he is, how much of the other thing he still does, because he's certainly got the ability to do both at a high level. But I think he's going to be mainly an edge. We'll see.
So you and I still differ on that a little bit. I think they're going to start him off as an off ball because it's the position he played most recently. It's a position where they might have an early need.
Sure. I don't disagree with that. I'm just saying, I think in time, eventually, that's where he's going to settle in.
Okay. I thought we said we took bets on like where he was going to be the first day of camp.
Well, maybe he'll be an edge. I don't know. If I said that, I'll stick to it. But
okay.
Obviously, if they don't have any other linebackers, if everyone else is hurt, he could be there. But yeah, we'll see.
I think his floor is being like a good starting off-ball linebacker.
I think that's fair.
And like if you take a player like that at 31, it's not awful value. I think the real value in that pick is if he becomes either an exceptional off-ball linebacker or he becomes a guy who really can rush the passer and becomes disruptive up front.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right, let's take a little break and we'll wrap up on the other side with a bunch more questions.
You deserve a car that thrills you, a car that puts goosebumps on your goosebumps. At Nissan, we've got everything from turbocharged SUVs to 100% electric vehicles that'll make your heart beat faster. Experience the thrill for yourself and shop your local Nissan store and NissanUSA.com today.
We are back on the Eagle Eye Podcast. We're presented by Nissan, Reuben Frank, and Dave Zangaro. Next one here comes from Michael. Great coverage and analysis as always during the NFL draft. I had a question about draft strategy and how teams evaluate player value. I often hear talk about the value of a pick and whether a player is worth taking in certain rounds. I'll admit, I haven't been following the draft process closely before, so this is all pretty new to me. If a team really likes a player, why not just draft them whenever they can? Why are some players seen as better value in later rounds instead of earlier ones? Would you give a quick explanation of how draft position affects things like contract and years of service, and whether that's one of the key factors teams consider when deciding when to pick certain players?
Well, if you like a player, you don't just draft him because you might be able to get him 5 rounds later. That's the old Chip Kelly thing. I mean, the whole idea is to maximize the talent that you get with all your picks. And if you start taking players that you like in the second round, who you could get in the 5th round, you're not doing that. So you're going to take the best player at that spot, or if the value is trading, you'll do that. But yeah, I mean, the worst thing you can do is overdraft a guy and take him earlier than you could have gotten him. Then you've really hurt yourself.
Yeah, especially in the early rounds. You have to kind of not fall in line, but you have to play that game a little bit, because ultimately, if it works out in your favor, you get more good players. But on the flip side of that, you can get too cute. And the Eagles have there have been certain instances before where they've gotten too cute and they've beaten themselves up about it. They always talk about Russell Wilson being the one back in, what was that, 2012. They really wanted Russ, and they thought that, man, we should have just picked him when we had a pick, and we shouldn't have waited longer because then we lost out on him. So there's some of that, and that's why they've said with Jalen Hurts, they wanted him. They said, let's just take him. Like, we have this pick. He's on the board. Let's take him. Let's not overthink it. I think for quarterbacks, you're more willing to do that, because if you fall in love with a quarterback, it kind of doesn't matter as much. And that's why you see quarterbacks consistently get overdrafted.
Yeah. Now, if they took Russ, they wouldn't have drafted a quarterback in the 3rd round. If they took Russ in the 2nd round, they wouldn't have taken Nick Foles in the 3rd round.
Yeah.
Now, maybe he still would have come here in 17, but
I mean, we can play the butterfly effect all we want, but I mean, Russ had a borderline Hall of Fame career in Seattle, and the Eagles kind of didn't have that quarterback for a long time. So
no, that's true. I think Russ is a Hall of Famer.
Okay.
Yeah, I think he is. It's just funny how it all worked out. There's not very many 3rd round quarterbacks that have won Super Bowls, and 2 of them were taken a few picks apart in 12.
Yeah, but I mean, that's really the reason. Is like, you're just trying to maximize value because you have a finite number of picks. Yep. But then, like, once you get into the day 3, though, you'll see guys get drafted before they're supposed to, because at that point, like, yeah, you fall in love with some players. The Eagles have their, they call them red star players. You don't need to get too cute at that point. If there's a guy you really like, go take him.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just a lot of balancing and kind of trying to guess what other teams are doing.
All right, next one from JT. I was extremely surprised at the heavy drafting of offensive line early in this draft, especially considering it seemed like it was a hyped draft as a D-line draft. What do you think attributed to the run on offensive linemen in the first 3 rounds? Also, side question, Dave, I'm very interested in taking my daughters to some of our great national parks now that they're both walking. Can you recommend an underrated one in the Northeast for us? Let's start with the O-line in the draft. I think it was because there was a pretty steep cliff after the first few rounds. And if you were a team that was offensive line needy, you had to take one early.
Yeah, unlike defensive line, which had more depth to it. I haven't actually looked at the numbers of how many old linemen were taken, but there's some really good ones. And then it dried up. So,
yeah, well, there was a run early. I mean, there was, I can look it up here. In front of the Eagles, there were a bunch of offensive linemen taken. You had Campbell at 4, Membu at 7, Banks at 9. He went earlier than people expected. Tyler Booker at 12 went earlier than people expected. Gray Zabel at 18. Donovan Jackson at 24. Josh Connerly at 29. And then Josh Simmons right after the Eagles at 32. So some of those players went up earlier than expected.
So that's 8 in the first round. Is that right?
I wasn't counting, but I'll take your word for it.
Yeah. But I don't think that was surprising. Maybe some of those guys you would have thought later in the first round.
Yeah, they got pushed up.
Yeah.
If you're the Eagles, that was good because it was pushing down other players too. Kind of like,
Absolutely.
I mean, it was very similar to, I mean, even more so in 24, where it was like what the first 15 picks were offense. The first defensive player didn't come off the board until like 16 or something.
Yeah, and Eagles took advantage.
Yeah. National parks in the Northeast. I mean, there aren't many. Shenandoah is great. It's in Virginia. I really like New River Gorge in West Virginia. Actually, that might be the most recent addition to the national park list. But there's a lot of places that aren't national parks that are really cool. We talked about Delaware Water Gap last a few weeks ago. That's a really cool spot. The North Woods in Maine are fantastic by like Mount Katahdin area. I would recommend that.
Yeah, just drive up the coast, stop in Camden, Rockport, Rockland, Portland, Ogunquit,
Oh,
Wells Beach.
Katahdin's like the North Woods. You have to go west a little bit.
Yeah, but the only way to get up there, right, is to take
Pretty
the
much.
one
Yeah.
and then make a left. Have you been up Katahdin?
I haven't climbed the mountain yet. I want to. It seems like a fun climb.
Yeah, the place my family used to go to in Maine, this little island off Portland, you could actually see Katahdin on a clear day, like 100 miles away. It's pretty cool. See Mount Washington as well.
Okay. Yeah, we stayed right on I think it's the Penobscot River. Yeah, beautiful area. All right. Next one from John. You know what? No, we've kind of answered that. It's about whether or not a team wants to take Howie's calls. I think we've done enough of that. So let's move on to Patrick. Hi, Dave and Rue. Big fan of the pod. Appreciate all the work you guys do breaking things down for us. I wanted to share my thoughts on the Eagles draft and get your take on something that's bugging me. I graded the draft to B-. Howie wasn't as aggressive as I expected him to be. After doing so much homework on fringe round 1 and day 2 prospects, with 18 of the 30 top 30 visits fitting that profile, I was surprised that he didn't move up at all. Even more surprising is that he didn't draft a single player who came in for a top 30 visit. Was he getting shut out when trying to trade up? Were other teams just blocking his calls? It feels odd to put that much prep work in and only walk away with Makuba from that group. Would love to hear how you both feel about Howie's overall approach this year, and if you think the lack of movement was more a product of other teams not cooperating, or if Howie simply didn't view this class as worth being aggressive for. Thanks again for all the great coverage. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts.
Yeah, I think in most cases, the price was just too high to get up to where he wanted to go. And, you're not going to make a trade just to make a trade. You have to be smart about it. And Howie loves to make trades. We know that, but he's not going to make one that's not in the best interest of the team. If that means giving up too much, he's not going to do it. I think that the thing about the 30 visits, like you have these different opportunities to meet with players, and there's different reasons. And he talked about this a little bit, I think, on Saturday. There's different reasons to bring in a guy for a 30 visit. You're just trying to get more information sometimes. Just because you bring them in, I mean, sometimes that information that you get might not be what you want to hear. So a 30 visit could disqualify a guy from consideration. It's like we didn't like the way he answered these questions, not comfortable with them. There might be some issues. So it's all about getting more information. I don't think it directly, I mean, at some point they're interested in those guys, but Howie's not going to sit there on the draft and say, we're not taking this guy because he didn't have a 30 visit with us. So, there's a lot that goes into who you pick, and that's a small piece of it. So I don't think there's any kind of cause and effect there.
Well, I will say, in recent years before this draft, they seem to take a lot of the players who they brought in, because look, if you're bringing in a player on a 30 visit, yeah, it's for different reasons, but you don't do it unless you're interested in that player.
Sure.
So there has to be at least some base level of interest. So I think it was productive to look at that list. Heck, in 24, they drafted a bunch of guys they brought in for visits. So was there some smoke screening going on by not drafting these players? Maybe not with a lot of them. I do think there's a reason they didn't bring Jahad Campbell in.
I think that's Likely.
I think there's a reason they barely had any contact with Jahad Campbell. Because with him, I think we found out the Eagles view him as more than an off-ball linebacker. I don't think they wanted to tip that. And this is just theory. I think they didn't want to tip the way they viewed about that player because they were hoping he would fall into their range. And if the Eagles are looking at him, a team that traditionally hasn't drafted off balls like that, now they paid Zach Bond, we know that. But if the Eagles are taking a harder look at this kid, I think that would tip off the other teams like, wait a minute, do they like him as an edge rusher? Should we take another look at him as an edge rusher? I think that was purposeful.
It's possible. Howie was asked that specific question as he came off the podium the other night, and he kind of smirked and said, I'm not going to tell you that, but I think there might be something to that.
Yeah, and it's not like that, like you're going to do that all the time, but I think this is a special case where you have a player who has different skill sets, and if you view him differently than other teams and you think there's an advantage in the way you view him versus the way other teams might, and you don't want to tip that, I get that part of it.
Yeah, and the thing about like the way they look at it, like there might be a guy they bring in for a visit who they have no intention of drafting, but they just want to get to know him better because like 70% of these guys are going to be free agents or on the street or something. And a guy, you've talked to him, you've met him, you have a background, you have a history with him. You might be more comfortable signing him. They've talked about that. It's a, scouting is a long process that goes on for years. And it's not just, we don't like him, we're not going to draft him. I mean, it's a lot deeper than that.
Next question from Cigar. His first one was more about teams not wanting to trade with Howie. We've got that one a bunch, but did the Eagles almost pick Shedeur Sanders? The Browns picked ahead of the Eagles and got him. What do you think?
It's possible.
I don't know if the Eagles were actually going to draft Shedeur Sanders, but if I'm Andrew Berry and I'm looking at the draft and I know how much Howie puts into the valuation of players and trying to sneak out as much value from a draft class as he can, and there's a player like Shedeur on the board in the 5th round, I'm probably getting ahead of Howie Roseman too.
And Andrew Berry certainly knows how Howie thinks.
Mm-hmm.
He worked with them. So I would think the same thing. Shedeur, if Howie drafted Shedeur in the 5th round, Shedeur Sanders may have never played a snap for the Eagles, but you're getting value because your chances of getting something for him at some point in the future are better than whoever else you might take in that spot. He has a couple good preseasons. Teams looking for a quarterback. You trade him for a 3 or a 4, get something back. So I think he would have taken him there.
I don't think he would have taken him, but look, I don't know. I think that it made some sense for a value perspective. But man, I'm looking at that QB room in Cleveland. What a weird, that's got to be the weirdest QB room ever.
It's a weird assemblage of quarterbacks.
And I don't know if any of them are any good. You have Deshaun Watson, Joe Flacco, Kenny Pickett, Dylan Gabriel, and Shedeur Sanders. Yeah. Who's the starter?
Touchdown Kenny, right?
They actually gave Joe Flacco some money.
Couple former Eagles. I guess Pickett by default right now.
Maybe they try to trade Pickett or Flacco.
Maybe.
Or maybe you have Flacco's your starter, Pickett's your backup, and then you let the other 2 kids fight it out for the 3rd job and put the other one on the practice squad. Like Watson's probably out. I don't think he's going to play. So
yeah, I don't think he's in the equation. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. And they've got all these quarterbacks. I don't know if any of them are any good.
Yeah.
Kenny Pickett's very tough. I think that's one thing we learned about him. He played really tough for this team, but I don't know if certainly if I'd want him to be my starter.
Reginald, who was emailing us during the draft. Only 2 picks left for the Eagles and still no tight end. Does this indicate Goddard will be staying? I can fast forward this. They did not draft a tight end at all. What do you think? Like the Goddard situation is one that's kind of hovering over this team right now.
It is. I think on the one hand, Howie was not going to reach for a tight end just because of Goddard's situation. But on the other hand, they don't really have a tight end one if he's not here. And you're running out of ways to get that guy after free agency and after the draft. They have a couple veterans. They have Calcaterra. But they don't have, to me, they don't have a tight end one. So I think the odds that he stays are greater than they were just because they need a tight end. And I still think it makes sense for both sides to agree on something sensible and
figure out the Josh Sweat deal like that bet on yourself if you're Goddard and hope you stay healthy this year and then get paid.
Yeah. And in the interim, it's not like he's making chump change. He's going to make several million.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know what the Eagles' best offer to Goddard is.
I mean, I think it will be like something what we saw with Sweat where you just like, all right, it's now guaranteed. You're going to make this money. But it's going to be significantly less than the 14, 15 mil you're owed.
Yeah. I would take that $6.5 million.
Yeah. Do you think the George Kittle deal has any bearing on him? A big deal for Kittle, who's older, who's also been better and more durable.
Yeah. Yeah. And I always thought Goddard in a perfect season could approach Kittle. I mean, great blocker, great receiver. If you ever put together 16 games, 17
play potential,
yeah, he's like a poor man's Kittle, but he's just never been able to put it together. Frustrating career, good career, great playoff player. It's like how many years have we do our stay or go? We're just sit there and like next year's going to be Goddard's big year. He's going to catch 82 balls for 1,060 yards and 9 touchdowns. It just hasn't happened.
Has not. Next one is from Dave. Hey guys, longtime listener. You're the best Eagles podcast by far.
Thank you.
Offensive line coach Jeff Stoutland seems to be a major competitive advantage for the Eagles. Do you have any sense of how long he will continue coaching? Do you have any idea what they would do if he decided to retire? Thanks for all you do.
Yeah, it really is a competitive advantage. And I think they're more inclined to take a project O-lineman just knowing that he's there. And not only is he good at working with those guys, he really enjoys it. He enjoys those, rugby players, guys changing position, late round picks, whatever it is, whatever the challenge is there. I mean, Brett Toth is the ultimate. I mean, this guy never pass blocked in college, like 20 snaps his whole career, and still around, still, I don't know how good he is, but at least he's functional. He's in the league. I don't know how long he wants to coach. Didn't he? I think he signed a 2-year extension last year, something like that. I don't know. I know he still loves what he's doing. He's got tremendous passion for it, tremendous energy. I don't think he's in any hurry to hang it up.
Yeah, I think he still loves doing it. I don't think they have a back. Like I don't think there's like someone waiting in the wings. They have other good coaches there, but I think they would just try to go hire another good offensive line coach who's probably not going to be as good as Stout. But
Paganetti, there's a couple of Paganettis out there.
TJ is now his assistant offensive line coach, right?
Yeah. Juan Castillo still out there?
Hey, Juan was a good offensive line coach.
He was
different
a good line coach.
Definitely a different type of coach. One of different things.
Good ones. I mean, even Andy's guy that he brought in at the end,
Howard Mudd.
Howard Mudd was a great coach. Kelsey loved him.
I mean, Howard Mudd's an all-timer.
He's an all-timer, and was on the team of the decade for like the 40s or something, or the 50s. I don't know which decade. But yeah, you don't even want to think about like losing a Vic or losing a Jeff Stoutland.
Yeah. So I did want to bring up that point. Obviously offensive line, you feel good about taking those day 3 darts and throwing them at an offensive lineman and bringing them to Stout. But, defensively, you feel so good about not just Vic, but that whole staff and developing these players. Sometimes it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy when you have good coaches who can develop talent. It makes your draft look a lot better. Like It's not like you can draft anyone, but if you draft some talent, they've proven to me that they're going to develop them.
Yeah, we had that conversation last year. I mean, like everybody on defense got better. A couple guys didn't get better, didn't get worse. I think this is one of the better defensive staffs they've ever had. I mean, obviously Andy's was really good with Spags and Sean McDermott and those kind of guys. But I mean, when you look at Christian Parker, you look at Clint Hurt, and you look at Wash, and you look at Bobby King. I mean, this is an elite teaching staff, and you're right. Whether it's a first round pick or a seventh round pick, those guys are going to get better, and they have, and certainly Vic's a big part of that too.
Okay, this next one I think is for me from Celine. Just to start, I'm a big fan of the pod. I'm a Philly native, but currently living in Minneapolis, and your pod helps me to keep up with the team. In the most recent podcast, Dave said in response to Rube quoting Merriam-Webster's definition of wizard, see, this is one of the things where the dictionary gets beaten down by people and the colloquialisms end up in the dictionary. I would ask Dave, what else is a dictionary for? Words only have the meanings they have because people agree that certain sounds and certain combinations hold certain meanings. In other words, definitions arrive from the way people use words. If enough people use a word to mean a certain thing, then that word means that thing. I will stand for this prescriptivist nonsense no longer.
Prescriptive?
Prescriptivist.
Prescriptivist. What's the writer's name there?
Celine.
Celine's a wizard.
Look, this is a very broad view of what a dictionary is. We've lived in a society for a long time. This language is not like we're not throwing stuff at the wall anymore. We've got the base down. We have all these words. It's like putting acronyms in the dictionary. I don't like it.
Dave, people don't know this. Dave's putting together his own dictionary.
I should. I once wanted to put a style guide together for our website. We had one back in the day, but then it's like, let's just use AP style and stop kidding ourselves here.
I used to just live and die by my AP style book. I would just study that thing every night. I had a really interesting life.
There's a couple things that you disagree with, and I can tell because I change them often.
I know you're always changing percent. I still spell it percent.
Oh, I don't change that one because that was an either or. I do change like a town name and the state. The state is now spelled out.
Not in my world.
I know. Also, All Pro for the Associated Press is capitalized because it's talking about that specific All Pro team.
I don't disagree with that one.
Okay.
Well, the state's spelled out. That makes me sick. All right.
I've gathered that. All right. I think that's a good place to end for today. Any final thoughts? Anything that's rattling around in your brain you want to get out?
We had a nice brunch on Sunday in Cherry Hill with, about 10 people we used to work with at our old paper. It was really nice seeing everyone.
It was funny that you say we used to work with. I worked with like half of those people, and I met the other half that day. It was nice.
Well, there's people there that we worked with.
Yeah, no, it was great.
I mean, I'm saying we as the collective, so we used to work with them. Like one of us worked with each of them.
That's true.
There was a guy sitting across from me who I apparently overlapped with for a year, who I don't think I ever met.
Oh, really?
Sitting next to Wayne, but no, it's just really, yeah. I worked with everyone but him directly, I believe, and two of them at my Gloucester County Times days. I worked with Dave and Phil, that paper, but yeah, it was just really nice. As we, usually the only time we ever see each other is at funerals, so we decided let's try to get together when we're not at a funeral. It was great.
It was good.
It was
Ruben and
right
I didn't
after
talk
the
to each
draft.
other the whole lunch.
What's that?
You and I sat on the other ends of the table, didn't talk to each other because we were like, we get enough of this.
Yeah, we're like, but after 3 days of the draft, I'm like, I'm not sitting anywhere near Dave.
I think that was fair. All right, yeah, that was fun. The draft was fun. We'll break down some more of the draft, some extra thoughts I have on the next podcast Thursday. If you enjoy the Eagle Eye podcast, please do us a favor, rate and subscribe wherever you get your pods. If you're watching on YouTube, please click the like button, subscribe there as well. All that stuff is much appreciated. Rube, for real this time, any final words?
Yeah, I actually do have a final thing to say. I made a mistake in a story, and it's embarrassing because I wrote about all 123 South Jersey players that have been drafted in the NFL, and I forgot Jeremiah Trotter, who grew up in Hainesport. He went to St. St. Joe's Prep in Philly. But I mean, I had every guy from the 40s, every guy from the 50s, and I forgot the guy from last year. That the team I cover drafted, and whose dad I've known for 25 years. So that was an embarrassing mistake, but yeah. I'm owning up to it. He'll be on the list next year.
You just see him every day.
I know, it's pathetic.
All right. Let's wrap it up there. Reuben Frank, I'm Dave Zangaro. This has been Eagle Eye, presented by Nissan. We'll talk to you soon.